There is a small country where you can live your entire life paying almost no income tax, where gasoline is cheaper than bottled water, healthcare and education are fully funded by the state, and the streets are so quiet that many foreigners describe them as empty. That country is Brunei. On paper, it looks like a perfect dream for anyone exhausted by financial pressure in the United States. But after more than a few days, people begin to notice something unusual. Life here is not loud, not chaotic, and not poor. It is tightly controlled, orderly to the point where randomness barely exists. You are given a great deal, but there are also many things you are not allowed to do. And it is this silent trade-off that makes Brunei difficult to understand. The real question is not how rich Brunei is. It is the true cost of absolute stability, and whether you would be willing to accept that trade if you were standing in their place. To understand how Brunei maintains such a quiet and stable way of life, you have to start with the source of its wealth. Brunei did not build its welfare system through high taxes or massive industrial production. The foundation lies underground, in oil and natural gas fields that have generated enormous revenue for decades, with a population of only a few 100,000. These resources are enough for the state to redistribute wealth directly to its people. Fuel prices are heavily subsidized. Healthcare and education are almost entirely free. Housing is supported. Many basic needs are met without placing heavy financial pressure on individuals. From the perspective of an American audience, this is a very different model. In the United States, welfare is always tied to debates over taxes, budgets, and personal responsibility. In Brunei, the equation is simpler because the state controls the main source of income, but that simplicity creates a unique relationship between citizens and the government. When social benefits flow directly from national resources, the state becomes the central provider of everyday life. In return, stability and order are treated as top priorities. People worry less about survival, but they also have less incentive, or need, to challenge the existing structure. This is not necessarily good or bad. It simply reveals a clear trade-off. Security is guaranteed, but personal choice exists within well-defined boundaries. Brunei does not encourage fierce competition, nor does it push for rapid change. Its primary goal is to preserve the current balance for as long as possible, and from this economic foundation, the rest of Brunei's social life takes shape. The slow pace of living, the quiet cities, and the strict social rules all trace back to how this country has chosen to use its wealth. From that economic foundation, daily life in Brunei unfolds at a rhythm very different from fast-moving societies like the United States. Here, urgency is rare, streets are clean, traffic is orderly, and residential areas are so quiet that life can feel carefully arranged. This calm is not accidental. It is the direct result of a society under little pressure to survive. People in Brunei do not race to pay medical bills or college's tuition. Many work in the public sector or in oil-related industries with steady incomes. When basic needs are guaranteed, life no longer revolves around earning money at any cost. Instead, it settles into a predictable pattern of routines that feel safe, familiar, and controlled. But this stability creates a distinct atmosphere. Large entertainment hubs are scarce. Nightlife is almost non-existent. Spontaneous or unconventional activities are quietly discouraged. For an American audience, where choice and self-expression are part of everyday identity, this calm can feel both comforting and suffocating at the same time. In Brunei, the community comes before the individual. People are used to following shared norms, from dress and public behavior to how personal opinions are expressed. Differences are not outright forbidden, but they are expected to remain discreet. Society runs smoothly because most people choose not to push beyond the boundaries. What stands out is that most citizens accept this rhythm naturally. When safety and welfare are secure, the urgency to demand change fades. And here, Brunei raises a quiet but powerful question. Can long-term stability replace the drive for growth and personal freedom? Or does it merely postpone tensions that will surface later in time? Within this quiet way of life, Brunei's system of laws and social norms reveals its central role. This is a country where the law does more than regulate public behavior. It directly reflects the state's philosophy of governance. Islamic law operates alongside civil law, creating a tight but consistent framework where order is valued above flexibility. For local citizens, these rules are not foreign. They are taught early and woven into religious life and community culture. Modest dress, limits on alcohol, codes of public behavior, and restrictions on entertainment are seen as natural parts of everyday life. When most people follow the same standards, society functions with very little visible conflict. For outsiders, especially audiences in the United States who are used to wide personal freedom, this system can feel confusing. Things considered personal choices elsewhere become legal or moral issues in Brunei. What matters is how society responds. Instead of loud public debate, most people choose quiet acceptance, because in return they receive stability and safety that many countries struggle to provide. This creates a fragile balance. Strict laws preserve order, but they also narrow the space for social experimentation. New ideas, alternative lifestyles, and global trends enter slowly, if at all. Brunei resembles a carefully sealed system, designed to resist outside disruption, and here, the question becomes unavoidable. When a society chooses absolute order as its highest priority, what happens to its ability to adapt in a rapidly changing world? Brunei has secured calm for today, but the true cost of that calm will only be measured over time. Within this framework of discipline and order, Brunei still preserves symbolic cultural spaces where tradition continues to exist alongside modern life. Kampong Air, the centuries-old water village, is the clearest example. Wooden houses standing on stilts, linked by narrow walkways, schools and mosques functioning side by side, form a complete living community. This is not a staged attraction for tourists. It is home to thousands of people who live there every single day. What stands out is how the state chooses to sustain this space. Electricity, clean water, schools, and healthcare are extended into the water village, ensuring residents are not cut off from essential services. Tradition is not preserved by freezing time, but by allowing controlled adaptation. For an American audience, this contrasts sharply with the idea of leaving everything to market forces. In Brunei, cultural preservation is part of a broader strategy to maintain social stability. Food and hospitality reflect the same spirit. Meals in Brunei are often simple, deeply communal, and closely tied to religious practice. Sharing food is not just politeness, it is a way of reinforcing social bonds. During religious festivals, many families open their homes to guests, seeing presence itself as a blessing. This generosity does not come from individual excess, but from a sense of security rooted in knowing that basic needs are already met. These cultural layers help explain why Brunei maintains such a high level of social consensus. When tradition is supported by welfare and order, people tend to hold tightly to what feels familiar and safe. Yet that same attachment raises another question. In a world that is changing at extraordinary speed, can spaces so carefully protected remain flexible enough to absorb necessary change without fracturing a society built on stability? When you look deeper into personal life in Brunei, the trade-off between welfare and freedom becomes much clearer. For many citizens, stability brings a deep sense of long-term security. At the same time, personal choices are shaped within very specific boundaries, from how people dress, to how they behave in public, to how social relationships are expressed. Everything is filtered through shared norms. What stands out is how this control is enforced. It rarely comes through direct coercion. Instead, it works through social pressure and self-regulation. People learn not to cross certain lines, not because they live in constant fear, but because stability itself has become a core value. When most material needs are met, the urges to disrupt order is far weaker than in societies driven by uncertainty. For an American audience, where individual freedom is seen as foundational, this model can feel deeply controversial. In the United States, difference and dissent are often viewed as engines of progress. In Brunei, consensus and calm take priority. These approaches are not simply right or wrong. They reflect different choices about how a society is organized. Yet the limited space for personal experimentation can quietly generate tension. Younger generations, increasingly exposed to the outside world through the internet and overseas education, begin to see alternative ways of living. Not everyone wants to leave Brunei, but questions about the future are starting to surface. How long can a society maintain strict order if the expectations of its youth change faster than the structure they live within? And here, Brunei becomes more than a story about a wealthy and peaceful nation. It becomes a long-term test of a social model built on absolute stability. The question is whether that model is flexible enough to adapt, or whether the very stability that defines today will become the greatest challenge of tomorrow. Looking ahead, the biggest question facing Brunei is no longer its calm present, but its future, when the conditions that created that calm begin to change. The oil and gas resources that once brought prosperity are not endless. Even though Brunei still has significant reserves, the global shift toward renewable energy and reduced reliance on fossil fuels is already underway. This places the country in a race against time. For many years, oil wealth allowed Brunei to postpone difficult reforms. When budgets were comfortable, economic diversification never felt urgent. But in a rapidly changing world, dependence on a single source of income can become a strategic weakness. Building new industries requires greater openness to competition, creativity, and different ways of thinking, factors that do not easily align with a society built on tight control and order. For audiences in the United States, this dilemma may feel familiar on a different scale. Many communities that once thrived on a single dominant industry paid a heavy price when that industry declined. Brunei now stands at a similar crossroads. With one key difference, it still has time to prepare. But that time is not unlimited. The central question is whether the current model can adapt without losing the stability that defines the society. Economic diversification often comes with greater personal freedom, higher risk, and the acceptance of new voices. These are precisely the elements that could challenge long-standing social consensus. Brunei, then, is at a quiet turning point. There is no immediate crisis, no visible pressure, but a long-term challenge is waiting. How this country prepares for tomorrow will determine whether today's calm becomes the foundation of a sustainable future, or simply a pause before unavoidable change. When all the pieces come together, Brunei emerges as a social model rarely seen in the modern world. It is a country that chose stability as its highest priority and used natural resources to protect that choice for decades. Here, the state plays a central role, not only in the economy, but in shaping daily rhythms, social norms, and collective expectations. This creates a deep sense of security, but it also makes change slow, cautious, and tightly managed. For audiences in the United States, where personal freedom and competition are often seen as engines of progress, this model invites mixed reflection. Brunei shows that a society can significantly reduce insecurity, poverty, and open conflict if it is willing to trade away part of its freedom of choice. The question is not which model is right, but how much each society is willing to trade to reach its goals. What stands out is that consensus in Brunei is not built through violence or overt force, but through a long-standing, unspoken agreement across generations. The state provides welfare and order. Citizens respond with compliance and trust in the existing structure. As long as this agreement holds, society runs smoothly, with almost no visible conflict. But every agreement depends on context. When the outside world changes faster than a system can adapt, delayed questions eventually become unavoidable. Younger generations, global economic shifts, and the pressure of integration are all testing Brunei's model of calm stability. In the end, Brunei is not just a story about wealth or strict laws. It is a living test of the limits of stability itself. How far can a society go when it places order above everything else? And is today's peace strong enough to secure a sustainable future in a world that never stops changing? As this story comes to a close, what Brunei leaves behind is not a sense of awe at its wealth, but a quiet question about how people choose to live together. This is not a perfect paradise, nor a society to judge too quickly. Brunei is simply proof that every social model is built on very specific trade-offs. Here, stability does not come from fierce competition or absolute freedom. It comes from a structure where the state, religion, and community are tightly interwoven. When people accept those rules, life becomes safe, predictable, and calm. But that same predictability also narrows the space for experimentation, for alternative paths, and for rapid adaptation to a changing world. For an American audience, this story invites a deeper comparison. In the United States, personal freedom fuels creativity, but it also brings instability and division. In Brunei, stability brings peace of mind, but raises hard questions about the future when conditions begin to shift. These two models sit at opposite ends of the same spectrum, and neither is free from risk. What matters most is not whether Brunei is right or wrong, but that it has been consistent with its choice for a long time. That consistency creates order, but it also allows unresolved challenges to quietly build beneath the surface. As resources change and new generations emerge, questions once left unspoken will demand answers, and perhaps the greatest value of this story lies here. It forces us to look back at our own societies. What are we trading away to gain the stability or freedom we live with today? And will those trade-offs still make sense in the future we are moving toward? And as you step away from the story of Brunei, the most thought-provoking part is not the wealth figures or the strict laws, but the quiet question this model asks every modern society. We often talk about freedom, growth, and choice. Brunei shows a different path, one where stability comes first, sustained by a long-term agreement between the state and its people. Not everyone would want to live in a society like this, yet it is hard to deny that the peace, safety, and social security Brunei has achieved are exactly what many other countries are still chasing. The issue is not who is better or worse, but understanding the true cost of each choice. No system offers everything without demanding something in return. For audiences in the United States, this story is especially worth reflecting on at a time of deep polarization and constant debate over values. Brunei reminds us that social consensus, however it is reached, remains essential for maintaining order. At the same time, it warns that consensus left unchanged for too long can become an obstacle to adaptation. In the end, Brunei is not an answer for the world. It is a mirror, reflecting the different paths societies can choose. You may admire its stability, or feel uneasy about the limits its people accept. Both reactions are valid. If this story leaves you thinking, ask yourself one question. In the society you live in, what are you willing to trade for long-term peace of mind? And will those trade-offs still hold when the world around you keeps changing faster than ever before?